Jessica, will you be live tweeting? Well, I guess you didn't hear me.
Hello, can you hear me now?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
I can hear you now, yes, thank you.
Okay. Oh, Jessica, I was just saying that, are you going to be live tweeting? Okay. You're on mute.
Oh. I think we just went live.
Yep. Oh, okay.
Cool. Hey, how's everybody doing today? We are joined, our American Promise Films has been kind enough to host another one of their webinars. We're also here with a few folks from the Mocha Moms illustrious organization, and I am William Jackson, the founder of Village of Wisdom. We're a nonprofit organization, and we work with African American families or black families here in North Carolina and really kind of across the country virtually to make sure that kids don't internalize negative stereotypes. So we're really excited to join everybody today and look forward to a lively conversation. I'm going to let everybody else introduce themselves and tell you about the amazing things that they do, and then we'll jump into the conversation.
You want to, Danae? You want to start with Danae?
Yeah, Danae, if you could introduce yourself, that'd be great.
Okay.
Hi, thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here. My name is Danae Aicher. I am the Director of Communications for Mocha Moms, Inc. And what else should we say to introduce ourselves? What do you need from us?
Anything else you might want to share about your background if you have kids or interested in the conversation, that would be helpful.
I'm sorry, I'm not hearing anything.
Oh, okay. Can you hear me now? Maybe not.
Danae, it looks like she's frozen.
Yeah.
She may need to disconnect and reconnect with us.
Maybe so.
I actually do. I have.
Danae, do you mind hanging up and relinking with us? Because we're not getting any feedback from you. We just have a frozen screenshot.
Well, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to introduce myself.
Yeah, that'd be great.
My name is Joe Brewster. I am a filmmaker, and I guess I am a physician. I wear a lot of hats, as we all do, particularly if you're trying to survive in the big city. I have two sons, and I came to this work as an expert attempting to raise my son, realizing I really wasn't an expert, and I needed a lot of help. So what I am probably going to share with you is the deeper dive that I had to do in order to raise healthy boys in urban America.
Great, great. Sounds wonderful. Drew?
Hi. Good evening, everybody. I'm Drew Ealons. I am the chapter president for the Silver Spring chapter of Mocha Moms. And I have one son who, his name is Maxwell, and he is almost 7. He is at one of the independent private schools here. And definitely enjoyed Michèle and Joe's film. It helped us as part of our process in making sure when we picked the school for our son, and gave us the best tools we needed to interact and engage this. And so while I live in the Silver Spring, Maryland area, we are natives of Birmingham, Alabama, so I have a a unique take on how we actually talk to our son. Started very early about who he is and race and engagement. So I look forward to this conversation.
Mm-hmm.
Great.
Sheila?
Hi, I'm Sheila Gardner. I am also representing Mocha Moms. Right now, I am representing our Occupied Schools initiative. And that is an initiative where we have trying to engage our parents as well as parents throughout the country and instruct them and encourage them in being more involved in schools and in the community and helping students. Also, I have a parent education company. I'm getting feedback, so it's making me have to take this out. Sorry. Also, I have a parent education company called Gardner Parenting, where we, again, teach parents and on every topic, including how to help children who are diverse manage and grow up to be healthy, strong, courageous, diverse students, successful students. I'm also an attorney, as we're putting on our different hats. I'm an attorney as well.
Okay. My name is Michèle Stephenson, filmmaker, former attorney, wife of Joe Brewster, and we made the film American Promise. We have a media production company that deals with telling stories that create greater complexities around our own representations of our communities, and we're deeply immersed in that. Have two sons, Idris, who's the on whom the film is based for the most part, American Promise. He's 20 years old, and we have a 13-year-old, Miles, who is is finishing up middle school and going into high school. And this conversation about internalized racism is really relevant to us every day. It's an everyday worry that we have, an everyday preoccupation, an everyday struggle, an everyday conversation. So I'm looking forward to deepening the exchange today.
I forgot to note, can you hear me?
Yes.
Sorry. My children, my oldest is 19, just turned 19. He finished his first year at Penn State. And my daughter in 11th grade, so we're looking at colleges for her as well, and my youngest is a freshman. So I have two boys and one little girl.
Okay, great. So,
I think Danae is back on. Can she? Hopefully that we don't get her frozen. You want to finish your intro, Danae? Sorry.
She's on
mute. You're on mute. Just press on the microphone that's got the...
Right. Can you hear me?
Yes.
yeah.
Perfect. Forgive the technological issues. I apologize. I am Danae Aicher, Director of Communications for Mocha Moms, and a mother of two, a 5-year-old son and a 4-year-old daughter. I come to this discussion having given a lot of thought to the issue. My children are biracial. We are in a multicultural, multinational home, and so the moment I found out I was pregnant, in fact, and it occurred to me that my child would be mixed, whatever that means, and that's for later on in the discussion. I started thinking long and hard and seriously about how I would hope they would identify themselves in the world, what that would mean, what I hoped it would mean for them. And so I'm very anxious to get started on this discussion.
Okay, great. Thanks everybody for introducing yourselves. So the one thing I wanted to kind of share with everybody, is there an echo? I think it is.
Yes, we have an echo from you, yeah. Could be you have two microphones on for some reason, or two speakers, something that's picking it up twice.
I'm not quite sure what that's about, because I have my headphones in. I'll try to take them out. Any better? Is that better?
Mm-mm.
Yeah. I don't know.
But we didn't have it before.
Well, do you want to try to introduce the video? So, because this isn't gonna. I need to try to figure it out.
Silhouette Jessica.
Hi everyone. So next we're gonna show a piece that broadcast on the New York Times early last week that's relevant to this conversation. And
Okay, we're getting an echo from you as well.
okay. Everyone's muted. Okay, I think that sounds better. Okay, so next we'll be showing a piece from a conversation about growing up Black.
Jessica, we can't hear anything on the video. I don't know if other people can hear it, but I can't. Can other people hear it?
No.
No?
Oh,
I think we're going to have to skip this.
okay.
Can't hear anything. Maybe you have to take the headphones off.
It might just be a screen share thing.
Oh,
So-
that's possible, yeah.
Might just see. I don't know if it feeds the audio. I didn't have an echo before. I'm wondering why I have it now. Drew, do you mind muting real quick to see if it's really just me? How about now? And there's still an echo. And now? Is there an echo? Great. Okay, so I was thinking about this video, and I think there's the echo again. So Danae, I think I actually just muted you because I think it's feeding back on yours.
Okay.
Thank you. So one of the things I was thinking about as we kind of sat down with the parents towards the end of our sessions is one of the students actually spoke up and said he wanted to know who came up with this idea that Black people are less than. And that really kind of stuck out to me because, you know, I had spent the last 8 or 9 months trying to figure out how to explain to people why this concept of Village of Wisdom was so important, why we needed to really be interested in building up our Black boys, why we needed to be interested in building up our Black children in general. And in that kind of one sentence, he really kind of captured it, is that there's this prevailing idea out there that for whatever reason, because of his skin colors, he's less than. And I think the video, from what I saw, got to that in a lot of different other elements. But I'm just wondering if folks have had kind of immediate reactions or interactions with their children where they've kind of suggested similar things, and what has been your response kind of in that moment when you realize that your kid kind of for the first time understands that people don't necessarily see them for the beautiful kind of human beings they are.
Well, everybody don't rush in, uh, but I will. And so obviously in our film we speak to that because our son asked that at 12. But the painful part for us, and people ask, well, what did you say to your son? The painful part for us is our son had been asking those questions since he was 3 or 4. And I think we lost some opportunities, not all of them, but to address that question. And before my wife takes over, and she normally often does, you know, I'm thinking back to my relationship with my own father, who is a Pentecostal preacher. We were from Los Angeles, and I recall being 10 years old and asking him the same question as he was preaching to me. And I just turned to him and asked him, why was God doing this to black people? And how did he justify this? And you know, he needed to have a good answer to get me in that car on my way to church. And he had a good answer. This is my paddle. If you don't get in that car, I'm going to use it. So it got me in the car, but it never really answered the question. And I think, in a joking way, what I'm saying is that unless we answer that question for our kids, they make up the answers, and that is much worse than anything that we could imagine in terms of influence from other people.
Yeah.
Michelle, anyone else?
Hi. For me, it's interesting. We started really, really early. As I said in my introduction, I'm from Birmingham, Alabama, so there's always been a very rich history about ourselves that we want to make sure. As I grew up, my mom and my dad and family members who've all somehow or another participate in the movement knew the importance early on of talking to us about who we are and the strength of who we are. And so we started out with our son from getting books that were authored by people with his same name, just didn't matter what their ethnicity was. But then we also got all the books that had characters that looked like him and looked like me, so that he can know and see us in things that he likes to do. He's an avid reader, even at the young age of 6 3/4, as he would say. And so we've had conversations about what has happened in the past. We watch different movies that talk about the civil rights movement, slavery, and we don't just let him watch it. We have conversations around it. So much so that even recently he said in class to his teacher that he is, although he may be sad about our history, he's still very proud to be black. So that tells us that having the conversation early, we started about 2, 3 years old, and my mom is 76, so you can imagine the kind of conversation she's been having with her grandson. So he's very firm and strong about who he is, and speaks up often about it because he's had a lot of conversation around it. We even took him to see Selma. And had conversations around that, and we continue to have conversations because he asks, and I always start the question with whatever question he asks me. I ask him the question, "What do you think?" Because I want to know that he's able to have that critical thinking aspect of all the things he knows thus far, and how does he apply it. So that's how we do it. So I haven't had that comment of why we are less than, because right now he feels that we're greater than.
Nice. That's awesome. I'm sorry, can I keep? Or no? Is it okay? Yeah? Okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
That's exactly, with my kids, again, they're 19, 16, and 14, and I started when they were very little, just like Drew. All of the books had reflections of themselves in it. But with regard to history, I would always pick out positive images past, and most importantly, present. You know, what are Black people doing today that my sons were into video games. So there are Black video game creators that they knew who were successful. And one thing I always did, and they still have in their bathroom today, I put a board up where I put up different, information, different things about Blacks in history, current events that are positive. So they are always reflecting. Well, I was always reflecting positive images of themselves, so they didn't see themselves as sort of negative. Also, my thing is when we do have to teach those difficult stories, your family has their own story. So put it in context. First of all, they can look in the mirror and see that they are the happy ending to all of those stories about slavery and Jim Crow, all of those stories. They can look at themselves and say, well, wow, and I came from a strong people. Look at where we are now. But one thing that I always did, actually, I have my own family history, and it's important that you research that. I have slave ancestors, I have pictures of them. I put together, scrapbooks for my kids to show them, yes, this is our history, and this is what your great-great-grandmother did. We have slave ancestors that had 6 boys that they put through college. I mean, to go from slavery to putting 6 men through college at Alcorn State is a great history. So when it's just showing them stories like, roots and all that, it's great. But what is your story? What can they really look at and say, wow, this is what we've done? So I think it's important to do that. And I have a few books I could share with you guys later, but I'm Chocolate, You're Vanilla is a great book to have. It talks about the ages and stages of racial awareness. So you can start too early telling them all of these difficult things that they really developmentally aren't ready for. So you want to at least sort of educate yourself on where they are before you introduce certain things, but always put it in a context of, look at what we've done, look at what mom and dad and your ancestors have done and you've benefited from, and look at where you're taking us now. So that's important.
I think there are 2 things that I want to kind of share and maybe bring out to the front. One is I think there are 2 conversations that need to be had, and I have to say, for me, I think my conversation with my younger son around this issue has been more successful, and I think it's because of the raising of awareness that I have had in the process of raising my first son. And there are 2 things. I think at 6, we can have these conversations, we can encourage them about the great identity they have, the past that they have. I grew up, Haitian, with my father constantly beating down this idea. It was the first Black republic. Haiti was the first successful slave revolt. You need to be proud of that. But yet, where is Haiti now? And there's another part of the conversation is like, then why are we still, what is it about the society we live in where our boys are still being shot, right? Those are the difficult conversations. So I think there are 2 things. One is, of course, you have to have the positive narrative, but we have to give them an understanding of the structural oppression that exists. So that, because that's the flip side of it. And as they grow older, as positive a narrative we have in terms of this is where you come from, this is the struggle that you've been through, we have to give them the language to understand what it is that they're facing today, so that they can unpack it, analyze it, and have the responses, to the discrimination that they're going to face. And as they get older, it gets more complicated. So I don't know how people react to that, but I think that for me, I take the case of Haiti as like understanding, the global, the globality of white supremacy and how it has oppressed Haiti along the generations gives me a better understanding also of the fact that there's still a struggle that has to continue. And I think in the case of understanding Baltimore, Ferguson, and all of these things, we must bring in this question of privilege and how it lays out. And I know it has to be age appropriate, but I'm trying to radicalize the conversation a little bit. I don't know what people think.
I like the radical. If folks don't mind me jumping in real quick. So I think you bring up a really important point, and this point goes to something that I frequently get frustrated by, and that is we have conversations, and I remember my parents having this conversation with me. Put your hands on the steering wheel, keep them at 10 and 2, and survive the traffic stop. And the conversation stops right there, which I think is your point, right? There is no further conversation. There is a systematic, structural oppression that is going on, and that oppression is not going anywhere unless people are very kind of strong-willed about trying to remove it, right? And so I think, and even, and this kind of has remained unproven in any research literature, but I do think anecdotally it kind of stands up to the test of logic, is that when I saw my parents advocating for me on my behalf, that meant a whole lot more than I think any words that they could suggest to me, right? When my mom was going up to the school and fussing out the third grade teacher because she wasn't giving me a fair shake and was treating me unfairly, and I knew that she was treating me less than, and both of my parents were up there, that meant more than anything else. I knew that they believed in every word that they said, and I think, and I connect that idea to like how are us as a people and how are we as a family participating in these protests, in these kind of civil actions, this increasing our civic engagement, because I think that gives kids an outlet. Like, yes, you have to kind of survive this particular moment, but we're also trying to give you a vehicle for you to find a way to actually establish some agency to kind of work against this issue.
So, I mean, I totally agree with you, Michelle, taking it there, and you, William, because it has been ever present in the news of what's happening with our young black men, and I unabashedly share this information with my son. And while, you know, I think every child may be different maturity-wise, and maybe they can all accept this in a different way, but I guarantee that the entire conversation that we have is one that is very real about what's happening. And we do have, and he does ask those questions. One question was, why do they hate us? And so I asked him, who is they? Because I want to be really, really clear, especially for a young boy, which I think a lot of young boys think about, oh, I want to go up and be a police officer. And so now that he's seeing this, I still ask him, what's that conversation? You know, but that's what he said at 3, which we already know that that's going to change anyway. His respect for the law has not changed, but he's very particular about his interaction with police officers, even at that age. But he's still nice and cordial, and he's not afraid in the sense of still having that curiosity that you should have. But yet he still understands that, and I do believe he'd probably go up and ask them, you know, what's the deal? What's the issue? But he's quite confident in how he is, and I think the more we try to keep away, the older they keep from them about the negative, the older they get, the harder it is to bring them to a clearer understanding of what's taking place. So right now he has a view of there's an issue. As an example, he knows that there's a law. He might not know the name Stand Your Ground, but he understands that there's a law that caused the death of Trayvon Martin. So for him specifically, he does not want to go to Disney World because it's in Florida where the law is. He also said that when he becomes president, because he still has that positive role model in the White House, that I'm going to change the law in Florida. So then I had to have a conversation about what that actually means and change the law. He said, well, maybe I need to go to Florida and run for an office so that I can be a part of changing that law. Maybe we should go out and march with everybody in D.C. for all of the people that were killed. So he's having those conversations, but he's not afraid. He doesn't have nightmares at night. He's also thinking about how can he make a change. And so we have to really have those sincere conversations, even at an early age.
Yeah, it's interesting because they talk about kind of developmentally. There's this, I think, important thing that happens with kids, and somebody spoke to this earlier, is that young kids are really egocentric, right? So they don't necessarily always understand you have a different idea than I do. You got a different idea than me? No, everybody thinks like I think, right? And so if you think something poorly about me, then that must be something that I have to think as well, unless the kid is kind of built up to the point to where the idea is so ridiculous that they just can't make sense of it and they'll just ignore it, right? But then as kids begin to get older, they kind of understand that other people have different opinions, right? And so they talk about this idea of privately, I understand who I am, although publicly you might see me in a different way, right? So this cop might think that I am intimidating in this particular moment, but I don't have to necessarily believe that I am some evil person or something like that, right? And so the degree to which these kids can separate those two as they get older is a really important thing, which I think a lot of y'all are hitting on. And I think and to me, it's really that kind of protection that allows them to be able to kind of withstand these instances with racism, right? You said you're so articulate for a black person, and I'm trying to figure out how to kind of deal with this idea. Well, I know that you probably just don't have a good conceptualization of black people. That's fine, but that doesn't have to do with anything with who I am. And I also think it's important to see how this is related to kind of these two pathways that I think kids can be on, which is there's a pathway of like navigation, and then there's a pathway of disruption. And so navigation-wise, I can navigate through these experiences with racism. And I think that's where a lot of times the conversations kind of sit at, right? Like we tell kids, believe in yourself, be strong, survive the traffic stop, be a great person, achieve really amazing things. But I think we have been for a long time, to Michelle's point, really light on our disruption conversations, right? How do those kids in Baltimore, how are they prepared to disrupt in productive ways? And I think it's a tough conversation because it's risky business, but I think the question always has to be, do we want our grandchildren fighting the same battle that our children are fighting today?
So I just wanted to make a couple of points. I started talking earlier, and I realized that I was muted. So I went through this whole speech, and but we have to remember a couple of things, that these kids are at different developmental stages. And so Trayvon means nothing to a 3-year-old. Trayvon doesn't mean much to a 7-year-old. You know what means something to them? That the light-skinned person got picked first for the basketball game, or that the 3 black boys are sitting in the back of the class and are getting punished more frequently, or that I am not I am not the teacher's pet. And why is the teacher's pet always looking in a certain way? And so as much as we want to protect our children, right, we are there just a few hours of the day once they're in school, right? They're sleeping, they're in class, and giving positive role models is a great tool. But this is a battle, and it's much bigger than that. And so one of the things that was suggested is, as early as possible, give them critical thinking skills, but the ability to understand what's going on. Sort of like I asked my father, why was the Bible projecting me in a certain manner? And or why is my son asked, why are the 3 black boys always getting time out in the back of the class? And the point is that you have to give them the tool to think when they're not around. And Michèle mentioned that. She said, and I had that conversation with my second son. They're making comments about him, about his race, and sometimes it comes from places that you would not understand. It doesn't come from whites. It comes from other blacks. And so if he's hearing that, okay, you got a green eye or you got a dimple, and I love you because of that, there's very little you can say to him without addressing that and having him understand that on some level. So you have to be pretty vigilant, but we have to figure out what are the systemic ways of what are the tools that we can get to have him see the larger picture when we're not around, that's age appropriate. And that's a very, very hard task. Like, what can we put in his toolbox, him or her, so when he leaves our home, he's operating in the healthiest manner possible. And I understand that I don't have all the answers, but I'm throwing out some things so that we can think a little more critically. And so one of the things we talk about is, no, I'm just going to leave it there because you guys, I'm sure, are going to have some great things to say about many things, so I'm going to listen. Uh-oh. Mute. Hello?
Yeah, I thought Danae was going to say something, so I was trying to maybe. Sheila, did you have something?
I was pointing to Danae. I think she was trying to say something. She's muted.
Okay.
I guess we can't. Well, I was going to say, is she coming back?
I think go ahead.
You know, positive.
Sheila, I think you should go ahead. You should go ahead until Danae may have to, I don't know what's going on with Danae. So.
Well, I was just going to say that the positive images, that's what combats the negativity. So that if they feel good about who they are and their history, when people come to them with what isn't true about them in their history, they can easily say, well, on their own, come to the thinking that, okay, that couldn't be true. Because I know what I know about myself and my heritage. So that is true. But the other thing is, you know, I think William was talking about the disruption. You know, having older before graduation last year got pulled over by the police right outside of our house. And it was the most frightening thing for all of us because he's 6'3", has long hair, he's 230 pounds, and he looks scary to white people. And he called, and we all were on the phone just sort of freaking out, like not knowing what's going to happen. He's very confident, very, you know, a successful student, the whole thing. But at that moment, we didn't know what could happen. He turned out to be fine. But the thing about it is when you say disruption, is it disruption or is it engagement? So we want to, you know, we talk to our kids about what's really going on in the world. You can certainly join a protest, but there's other things that you can do that may be more effective. Talking to your city officials, writing letters, becoming involved in policy writing. So, you know, if we don't want to blindly send our kids out there saying, you know, you need to, maybe your definition of disrupt is not as you know, basic as what I'm thinking, but we want to always teach our children how to engage in ways that are going to really make a difference.
Yeah, I mean, I think about people who do divestment campaigns, you know, for organizations that support privatized prisons, understanding kind of how the prison industrial complex is really hurting our students. I think about, you know, parents being able to be disruptive in schools, right? So the degree to which families are advocating, to me, this is one of the more crazy things that we do in education. Imagine if you went into an all-white school and the only thing they learned about was Black history. And then for a month out of the year, they took 2 or 3 days to talk about white history, and they did kind of the most oppressive years of that white history. These are things that, you know, I could see parents justifiably advocating for. There are so many schools, because the United States kind of remains to be a segregated country in terms of its schooling, that are serving the large majority students of color. But the history that we learn, especially around Black folks, begins at slavery and ends at the Civil Rights Movement. It doesn't go back to kind of what our history looks like in Africa. It doesn't kind of even continue past those greats of the Civil Rights Movement. And so I think these are things that we can kind of advocate around. There's a plethora of things. I think it's really kind of up to our children to really think about it. And her name is Gloria Lanson-Billings. She talks about social justice. And essentially, she was observing these teachers, and the teachers were kind of established as like some of the best teachers in California at the time. And one of the projects that teachers had the students working on was identifying the number of alcohol stores in the general vicinity of their neighborhood and comparing that to the surrounding neighborhoods. And they ended up writing a letter to the politicians in the area to kind of change this particular situation. You know, all of these I think are really great examples, and I think it's, you know, it's incumbent upon us to really kind of look for those ways, as you said, to, you know, it's not just about protesting in the streets, it's about kind of doing real change. Like, what does that real change work look like? And I think a lot of times that takes personal passion and personal research for folks to kind of find those things.
One of the things that we like to do and that we've learned to do better with our second son is we get very much involved in the curriculum, because not only we discovered that there's very little Black history in the classroom, but the Black history is told from a certain point of view. So from our victimization, and it's almost as if the kids have a script, and they're not allowed to deviate from that. So we asked the teacher who teaches nonviolence, let's look at the other side of nonviolence. And so that is a scary thing to look at, but it's part of the discourse. And it allows them to go from thinking that, you know, Malcolm X was a bad guy. The only time they think about someone like Malcolm X is, was he a good guy or a bad guy? Well, maybe it's part of the process that brought us to where we are today. And the whole class benefits from that. But more importantly, we go back to what we were saying earlier. We can't fight the battle by just being a good role model and giving them positive images. They have to be able to do that on their own in the classroom. They have to be able to question what's being taught to them. And the most amazing thing that I saw in the whole Baltimore incident was how the press were constantly called to task in terms of their framing of what was going on in the street. And those were kids. I'm kids. They were 22, 23, 24. But they were. It got to the point where the press was almost afraid to say anything without really thinking about it. And so those are the kind of young men and young women we need to be raising, so that when, for example, when your kid goes to the hospital and they're seeing obvious evidence of healthcare disparity, they can be able to frame that as well, as opposed to just school and music or whatever their immediate environment is. We have to give them tools so that wherever environment they go in, they can make sense of it. Whether you're on a trip to the Dominican Republic in the summer, and someone, my complexion says that he's a white man, and he begins to recount all of his distant ancestors from France and Germany. My son can say, you know what? That's a part of, and he's 13, systemic white privilege and racism. And this is how I understand that. But anyway, I need not ramble. But what I keep going back to is, gotta give it. Sorry, go ahead. Is that Danae? Oh.
Yes.
You're saying something, Danae?
No.
Oh, okay. Well, you know, when my wife looks at me this way, she means stop talking.
Yeah, I was just going to say, you need to mute yourself, Joe.
Something that Joe said that also, you know, I actually have a bit of a difference in. I think it's still very important for my son and my family to understand the dynamics of the Tamirs, the Trayvons, etc. Because it also, especially in the school where he is, which does a pretty good job of diversity as far as teachers and students. So that's that was very important to us when we saw that. But they do much more conversation around what's happening in the current affairs at the high school end, because he's in a K through 12. But Maxwell is driving that conversation in his first grade class. So he is constantly bringing up his history. I even overheard him when he had a play date saying, hey, I want to talk about my history. Let's talk about my history. Now, I don't know why he wanted to say that to the young man as we were on our way to our event, but he wants to talk about his history from what he's been able to read in all the books that we have here that talks about his history. He's not ashamed of the slavery, because he will tell you if it wasn't for the slaves, there wouldn't be a White House for President Barack Obama to be in. So that's his conversation. And that's the conversation he has in the classroom. When they were going to the White House to do a tour, he talked about what he knew around the White House and history. The teacher even asked me, had a conversation with me about, well, what are you teaching your son so that I'm able to help him along in the conversation? And I think she used the word, I don't want him to be burdened with this. And I, it was in an email, so I had to go talk to her because I wanted to understand what the word burden meant, because our friends, our Jewish friends, they definitely talk about their history, every aspect of it, from day one. They go to school. If they're not in a school that is of their faith, they are talking about it. They have the rituals. They have the ongoing conversation. So I took my cue from them. I took my cue from how our families used to do back in Africa, wherever you are from, because many of us can be from a lot of different places, but how they told the stories. I have my mama sit and tell Maxwell the stories so he understands why it's very important for him to vote when he's of age. Not because he goes to the poll with us, but because my mom had to recite the Declaration of Independence in order to have the right to vote. So he brings all those connections there. And if you, even at 6 or 7, he wants to change the laws. He wants to have this conversation around that. And when Joe talked about critical thinking, I love the way, and I don't take the credit. I just really think this is a part of him. But he does take every from his faith. So Joe mentioned his father being a minister. We're not, but we take him to church, and he goes and he learns. And so he brings everything together in his mind for what he knows in his 6 3/4 years to understand what's happening right now. And he's not ashamed. He's not ashamed or afraid. And so I have to be his advocate at his school, because I know now he's going to press. So that means I have to press and make sure I make the way for him, because he's going to press and make sure that there are enough books in there about people who look like him, that they're having the conversation about the history more than just for Martin Luther King birthday and more than just for Black History Month. So, but all of that comes from the foundation of having open and honest conversations. And you can have those even by talking about, as Sheila said, looking at your family. I'm sure there are some people who are part of different races and ethnicities within your family, and you can talk about that even from that point. When we went to Charlottesville to see Thomas Jefferson, we talked about Sally Hemings. We talked about everything, So he has to have that well-rounded conversation, or starting to get it from what he can understand, and then have those conversations. We don't just dump it on him and walk away. I think it's critical that parents be not afraid to have the conversation and help them understand what they're seeing, so that they're also able to hone upon all the different skills to be able to talk about that.
Can I say something, just add one thing to it? I don't want to change the subject, but I think it's also important that when you talk about well-roundedness, that we show our children injustice that happens all over the world, so they can see it as sort of a global justice issue, and they are not just seeing Black Americans as sort of this narrow group that's always picked upon, but looking at themselves as global citizens and seeing how it's being handled all around the world, in the past, present, future, but how those types of issues are being handled around the world that helps them sort of not be so narrowly focused, but really globally focused. And then they're able to sort of see themselves in other people and gain ideas for their own struggle, for our own struggle here from around the world.
But Sheila, we do, what I often tell them is just like they're protesting and they're marching and they're doing those things, that's what happened. They got that from the civil rights movement. They got that from what our struggle was. So I do point to that. He sees all that, what's happened in Egypt and all these other places, but I also bring it back home. Like, you know what Grandma did and great-grandma and all of them did in Alabama and whatever? They got that idea from us. So be proud to understand that they're taking those tips from us to be able to make effective change and from us, our ancestors, and make those changes there.
And we got that civil rights. My mother was active in civil rights too, from Gandhi, and that's where that movement came from, and it came to us. And so it's just really, I'm looking at what's going on now in the news and helping them to feel that, wow, this goes on all over, and we all need to be a part of this sort of coming together and figuring out, how to end really still what's going on, colonialism in the world.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a really useful conversation, and it brings me to a couple of things I think you all have kind of talked about a little bit, which is just kind of what resources are folks looking to kind of have these conversations? Like, how are there books that you're reading? What things are you sharing with your children? How do you even kind of enter into the conversation? I know there's a couple of, so there's a researcher, Howard Stephenson, there's some of you all who may know, who has a book out with a couple of other authors that talks about talking to children about this. I was just reading Carter G. Woodson's The Miseducation of the Negro, which I think is a really kind of strong book to kind of really kind of challenge a lot of the things that are going on in schools and kind of how kids are being educated. And then I think finally I was thinking about Invisible Man, which is a book probably for a little bit older boys, but just another thing where I drew a lot of ideas from when I talk about kind of race and these ideas. And so I'm just wondering, as parents, are there certain resources that you all look to kind of start the conversation or initiate the conversation? Yeah.
Actually, I have a few books for parents. So maybe you're talking about, are you talking about for parents or for children? Does it matter?
I think both, right? Like, so books that parents are looking at before they're having a conversation in preparation, but then also books that can be used as teaching tools, right? That kind of act as a foundation to have the conversation with kids about.
I can type these in, but this one is a good one, Strength for Their Journey, and that is by Robert Johnson and Paulette Stanford. The one that I talked about that gives you the ages and stages of racial awareness for children, which I think is great, is I'm Chocolate, You're Vanilla, and that's by Marguerite Wright. Those are two really good ones. And I'm sure Joe and Michèle have these books too, about all of the Black inventors and things like that, so kids can. I have another one on Black First. So I think find whatever it is that they're studying, finding someone that looked like them who's been successful in that area. But for parents, those two are great, and I can list some other ones if other people want to talk now.
Cool. Did anybody have any other resources they might wanted to share off the top of their head, maybe?
I think for parents, I know the book by Beverly, and I can't remember her last name, Why Are All the Black Kids Sitting Together at the Table? Really provides a nice overall kind of contextualization of racial identity development for different racial groups too. And I thought that was I thought that book was phenomenal in terms of laying some groundwork for me in terms of the conversations and better understanding also the relationship between the teachers that my son was involved with and my son, so I could better advocate actually also in the classroom. But I think when I think about my younger son, it seems to me that it's almost been less books than the right affinity groups that are kind of led by strong male figures that have helped, unpack some of the things that maybe as parents, as they get older, they kind of listen to us less. So, or they're listening, but there's more resistance to the conversation a little bit. But the fact that he's within an affinity group at school that really kind of reinforces a lot of what we believe in, I feel is really kind of important, with some black male role models that are not afraid to kind of ask the difficult questions or look at, institutionalized racism and structural issues that can give him the language, reinforce the language that we get that we give him at home. And I've seen that kind of bear fruit a lot. So, well, I think the books are definitely important. I think being able to have live, peer-to-peer dialogue that's well facilitated with men who are older, or people of color who are older, to help them kind of process what they're living, has been really beneficial.
Cool. If anybody else has a resource maybe to share, we got about 4 minutes before I think the call ends.
Quickly, we use the Who Is books. So there's a line of books that say who is Martin Luther King, what is the March on Washington. There's a group or section of books that's that. There was a book called Ruth's Green Book that gave a bit of history about the books that African American travelers used back before the 60s, to kind of talk about the movement in a way from a child's perspective, that he's able to, again, we read those books and then we talk about them. And we also have the opportunity to get our parents to share their stories as well. We have 2 former Negro League baseball players, so we had to talk about why there was a Negro League and then how it all integrated. So having those types of books to talk about the movement that's age appropriate for them, and then we talk about it. I actually learned a lot from those books too, because they're elementary enough to be able to have a good conversation around.
Cool. So do folks have any kind of closing thoughts? I was just thinking about it, a new kind of virtually available, and I think they're releasing a book now. It's called Because of Them We Can .com, and they have a lot of really kind of positive images, especially for younger kids. And I think just maybe kind of my closing thought is really, again, pushing people back towards this idea of not only having conversations around navigation, but also conversations around disruption. And what does that mean for parents, right? That doesn't necessarily mean that you have to be kind of on the front lines of picket lines, but I do think that means some real kind of civic engagement, either at the school or financially, how people are deciding to kind of invest in things, or socially as they figure out who they're going to support at a local level, but then also kind of galvanizing as groups and being able to kind of apply political pressure on different organizations. And that's definitely something that at Village of Wisdom we've been trying to think about hard. How do we help and facilitate parents as they go about that journey of trying to disrupt this kind of systematic racism that's hurting our children? Joe, did you have some final thoughts?
Yes, I have a couple of final thoughts, and they're very similar to something that Michèle recently mentioned. It's a huge world out there, and they're being exposed to all kinds of influences. It's sort of like we have to be on so that we can have the discussion where they are. If an incident happens in the schoolyard, that's where the discussion needs to be had. Walking home from school or in church, the reality is that the more that we can have these discussions in a natural way, that we can be prepared to have that discussion, the better off they are. And so we discuss the teacher's behavior and treatment towards them. We discuss why or the principal or the janitor. And what happens is, even without calling it teaching a systemic viewpoint, we basically give them the skills to understand the world that they exist in. And that's an option also, with being able to discuss it wherever they are. And that's exciting for us, because you have to develop a keen awareness of the world we're in. We just can't accept what's being told to us. And I'm going to end it there. Sounds like you guys have thought about this a lot, and I certainly learned a fair amount from you. But I'm so glad I'm finished with this 13-year-old, and I can think about grandkids or something along those lines, because this is hard work.
Yeah, I mean, just to reiterate that, I think every moment is a teaching moment for both the disruptive and the navigation. I mean, I like the way you dichotomize that, because I think it's so important to have those tools of disruption that may happen at different levels. But I even think I spend time talking with my son about the rap lyrics he listens to. Which rap artist is more disruptive than the other, and why is the poetry of why do I prefer J. Cole over somebody else, and what is it? So, and with even that systemic perspective, I think it allows them to be also critical listeners around the kind of things they listen to. So each moment, because we are seeped into this system is everywhere, there's always an opportunity, even to discuss and unpack this question of how we internalize oppression.
Great. Are we good? Is everybody good? They got the final thoughts out?
Well, it always gets good when we're about to hang up.
it took a while for her to get the juices going.
But Danae was kind of quiet. We lost her, and then we never heard her again.
Yeah, I'm not sure what's going on there. Next time we'll get her a main spot. Yeah, so thank you all so much for joining us. I hope that this is the first of many conversations. If folks are looking for some information and resources around this and trying to enter in the conversation, definitely check out villageofwisdom.org. We have a parent guide down there. We're doing parent highlights of parents sharing the same ideas that you all have shared today, and just kind of collecting those in written form. Thank you all so much. Thanks, American Promise. Thanks, Mocha Moms, for putting this on and organizing this. It's been great and amazing.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Good night.